Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Astro Weather. It's 9:28. The date, not the time. And I'm Robert Phoenix. I'm joined here by Jasper the Astro Cat. You can kind of see one of his ears poking up. So Jasper had gone on strike apparently, and I wasn't aware of this. And he eventually settled his demands with me, and I didn't even know that he settled those demands, but he had gone on strike, and maybe it was in solidarity with the actors and the writers. Who knows? But it's good to have him back, right, Jasper? You're part of the show, man. They come for the Astro and they stay for you. Anyway, how is everybody this morning? And wherever you are in the realm, I hope you're having a more than reasonable experience. Very interesting times we are living in. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Um, so I think the news of the day is this is non-astro news, but I'm going to talk about it on 15 Minutes of Flame. The news of the day is the disappearance of Katie Hobbs. This is very strange. Very, very strange. Like she's gone for a day, and well, it could be more, but they appointed, I think, the assistant secretary treasurer. I mean, somebody who's like fourth down from the top of the pecking order. And there's some rumors that she's gone to get oral surgery, but do you really do that when you have oral surgery? Something really strange is going on in Arizona. I'm going to try to cover some of that over on 15 minutes, but it's part of the high strange that's in the air in general. So why don't we jump in and let's see. Yesterday, yes, the energies yesterday were they were all over the place, man. And but at the end, I think we're able to kind of rein it in. The big news, I guess, is we're coming off the full moon with the Moon Saturn conjunction, and now we have Moon Neptune conjoined, and it's a very, very different proposition, right? Like Moon Saturn is dry, pragmatic, right? It's got that built-in austerity. Even in Pisces, it's sort of like squeezing blood from a rock in some ways, but you manage to get something out of it. Yesterday was for me when I did 15 minutes coming off of the night of protests in Philadelphia, right? It was very sobering. It was a very sobering look at where we are. And to me, that epitomized the Moon Saturn conjunction, right? Like, I don't know how you can like not look at that, even if you are the staunchest ally of, social or capital reform within, excuse me, it's the coffee, within the bounds of reason, right? So that happened yesterday, and I really felt it. It was like, man, this is. I mean, we've seen these wake up calls, but it was really a very stark wake up call. Now, on the other side of this too, another interesting point, and I've talked about how we're going to get evil, bad, weird, and good, weird, right? I've talked about that before, and that's going to be like the clash of these energies moving forward. Like some of the stuff we're going to see is going to be really weird, but it'll be good. And sometimes we'll see evil weird or bad weird, and sometimes it can flip into good. So I think it was 2 days ago, Colin Kaepernick decided that he wanted to come back to the slave plantation and wrote a letter to the New York Jets, basically begging to put him on their practice squad. So why is this important? Well, it's important because Colin Kaepernick had become this iconic figure in a lot of ways, right? Like he was the guy that kind of kick-started the Take a Knee movement, which eventually bled into Black Lives Matter and the Summer of Floyd. So there's a lot of complicity, and in some ways even like blood on his hands. I'm not going to beat around the bush. There were people that were killed during the Summer of Floyd. Businesses were burned, and lives were changed, and just brutal stuff, right? And Kaepernick is part of that narrative. And so, yes, now he pens this letter. It's like he's the one on his knees. And what's happening is that he has been shown to be uh, false, duplicitous in a lot of ways. And so the people that respected him, even in his own world, are having a much harder time stomaching his letter to the New York Jets. See, these things are important, right? Because it opens people's eyes, and even people who had been supportive of him are now like distancing themselves from. So this is all within the last 48 hours, right? So you have these eye-opening moments, and even when Kaepernick wrote that letter to the Jets, and it comes out, we're in that full moon with Moon Saturn in conjunction, and we're not looking at the situation through rose-colored glasses or feeling through rose-colored glasses. What we're doing is we're looking at the so-called realities of what's taking place or how somebody's exposing themselves. So these energies are very interesting, and they're not they can be very supportive in a lot of ways, right? Sometimes it's just very hard to wrap our heads around it. I mean, even the Sun Palace conjunction and seeing these patterns, right, with what's going on with Libra and fairness and unfairness, and people who have a modicum of consciousness, they're looking at it and they're going, this doesn't balance out, right? The receipts don't add up. So even though at times it may look like we're dealing with a lot of chaos, and we are, a lot of entropy and collapse, and we are, there's also this other parallel narrative that's going on. And just keep your eyes open for it, right? And I think that Moon Saturn conjunction was very sobering for a lot of people. Now, today, it's a bit different because we have this Moon Neptune conjunction, which is less sobering. Where are we? We're at Thursday, right? So people are headed into the weekend. And I could easily see, like, let's get this party started. Like, this is that kind of night. You were just coming off the full moon. Now, there can be some interesting reverie in some ways with the Moon Neptune conjunction. And I think it might be easier in some ways, because even though we're coming off the full moon, like the opposition or the opposite sign, Libra, it's not like Virgo, right? It's not like there's this hardcore, I'm either all in with austerity and all in with purpose and function, or I'm all in with just getting blotto, right? Libra is interesting here because it does have some ability to kind of balance this out. So one of the things that I do like about this opposition is the artistic and creative potential. So if any of you, because remember, like, there's a very strong connection between Venus and Pisces, and the inconjuncts that occur with Libra and Pisces. It's a very interesting connection between these two aesthetically driven signs. So if you have any kind of artistic potential or inclination, like, today's a really good day to feel into the muses. Let's call them the muses. I think there's potential for high muse energy today, right? Even though we have this opposition, we have a great grand trine, and Pluto is in sextile with the moon and Neptune. But now, I talked about this yesterday, when Mercury moves into this grand trine with Pluto, and then just kind of at slightly at the midpoint between Jupiter and Uranus, there's clarity, right? There's clarity, but not only clarity, but you can see alternative solutions. You can find different ways of doing things. And I mean, and we're going to be in this grand trine energy for until at least Monday, right? Like, what do we have, 4 days? More than that. I mean, we're going to be in it for the next 9 days, because ultimately, once we get past the separation of Uranus, which will be what, 5 more degrees away from 27. So 5 days, about 27. Even then, we're still in that grand trine. 6, 7, 8 days. So we're in this grand trine for 8 days. Put your thinking cap on, right? Come up with solutions that you haven't allowed yourself to come up with. Mercury and Pluto, that trine will keep digging in a good way until you find something, right? But if you could, here's the key: take some different paths, do something different, right? You have to stimulate your thinking, your decision making process, so that you're not just repeating the same things over and over again. And I think that's a really interesting part of this, like, next 8-day period, with this very pragmatic Mercury and Virgo coming in, and really going much deeper. And with Pluto, you also get into the realm of, like, finance and money. And I've been seeing some weird things with Gary Gensler and the SEC, good old Gary. And we're also creeping up on another one of these government shutdowns, right? So we're kind of in this place. You got to pay attention here. You have to pay attention. Where's your money? What is it doing? Where's your money? What is it doing? Health-wise, I think Mercury trining Uranus and Jupiter can offer you alternative solutions for your health, and potentially even much more rapid recovery. Again, if you're somebody who, and I think a lot of you who watch this show are pretty independent. You're independent thinkers. A lot of you have some real healing acumen, or a few things, or you take care of your bodies. This might be a period of time where you can actually help other people and share information with them. They may be more open to it now. I'm just saying, right? But what you want to do, if you're going to do that, you're going to want to come kind of indirectly at it. You're going to want to be creative with it. So I think this is a really good time to connect with people who might not be doing well physically, right? And you may know a few things. So this could be a very interesting period for those kinds of discussions to happen. And if you are in the healing arts, if you do healing work, you're going to have a lot of people come to you, right? This is just the nature of, even, I mean, obviously, since I'm in San Antonio area, the grand trine is pointing downwards, so it's headed towards the earth, right? So these are earth energies that are being directed with this grand trine, and they are earth energies because of the elements that we're dealing with here, right? So if you are somebody involved in the healing arts, you could have a lot of people coming to you, and you could actually, and you get into doing that work not because of the money, right? But we all have to eat. According to Meatball, we all have to eat. So this is a good time for that, right? It's a good time also to review your practice. And I know that a lot of people who get into healing do it for the purity of it, right? They do it for the purity of the act. And some people are very adverse to things like marketing, getting their name out there. If you have that problem, you should attack it directly during this grand trine. You get, I even did it, right? Like, in as much as, you know, I have to eat and, take care of my household and all that stuff. So I'm a working astrologer, but I can't tell you how long I thought about adding Buy Me a Coffee to this channel. Like I've been thinking about that for 6 months. It just didn't like click into my head. Hey, you're demonetized. Why don't you add the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is still there, by the way. It took me 6 months to get there because I think when people are engaged in a lot of the work that we do, we tend to devalue it. And we devalue it because we want to make sure as many people as they can access it. And so we tend to, I wouldn't say lower our standards for ourselves, but we lower the bar for how we can be compensated for our work. I think it's just the nature of the beast when you're in this world, right? Because healing work generally tends to be dominated by the sign of Virgo. And Virgo, Virgo is, you look at the Hermit card in the major arcana, right? You look at him, he's an old guy. He's got his little staff and his, little rucksack, and I don't eat very much. Just give me a bowl of rice and I'm fine, right? I mean, so if you're in this world, this is a really good time to explore your relationship with how you're compensated for what you do. It always, well, did Jesus do this? Did Jesus get? And I, a long time ago, I had to reconcile that. And it's like, they were trading loaves of bread and stuff back then, and it was just sort of the coin of the day, even though they did have coins, the coin of the day. So today we would be involved in, he'd be involved in something very, very different. Maybe Jesus would be into Bitcoin. Anyway, this is a good time for that, right? And if you take it out and extend it past this model of healing, it's also connected to your own work and your own purpose. And what are you doing? Are you getting value out of it? And this is a good dialogue. This is a really good dialogue. Mercury's also coming in here with Moon Neptune opposing it. And, there's this saying, shoot for the moon, right? Shoot for the moon. And I think in some ways, if you bring Mercury into this conversation, you could bring that up, right? Shoot for the moon. Like, why not? Right? This is kind of a why not day. And for some people, the moon is maybe closer than others, right? Like for some people, the moon is way out there, and shoot for the moon means something like, man, I don't know if I can ever do that. It's so far away. For other people, to shoot for the moon is like, let me get out my 30-30 and take a few pot shots at that big plate in the sky, right? But this is one of those days. And it feels to me like, and especially with Mercury, because it's going to stay in this oppositional relation with Neptune. It's like, why not have why not have a dream, and why not have a mapped out path to that dream, right? This is a really good time for that. Now, here's what I will say. If you are working on something like that, right? Like I've got this great idea or I have this dream, keep it to yourself for a while. Just keep it to yourself, because a lot of times we want validation for the things. Doesn't that sound good? Does that sound great? And somebody will say, no, I think it's a fucking stupid idea, right? So until you work everything out in your mind or on paper or on your computer, right? I would say keep that as much to yourself as possible. I mean, we all want support for the things that we want to do. The other thing too is a lot of times with a Mercury Neptune opposition, people will steal your ideas. So you don't want to jump the gun and say, hey, I have this really great idea. What do you think about it? Right? It's better to keep that closer to your chest. So these are all kind of bits and pieces, right? These are the ingredients for the recipe of success, at least with what we're seeing here. You know, life is really weird. We all know that. So on Monday night, and I'm just trying to figure out how this all happened. But on Monday night on Sirius Sports, maybe it's just in the air, but on Sirius Sports, me, my buddy Al Dog, and Christopher Gardner, we did a 2-hour show. And towards the end of the show, I did an astrological chart on Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, right? I'm looking at their relationship because it's a sports show and it incorporates astrology. 2 days later, ESPN has an astrologer on the show looking at their chart. I mean, so maybe it's just in the air, right? Or maybe somebody from ESPN said, "Hey, what's this Sirius Sports thing about?" And they looked at it and said, "Hey, we need to get an astrologer on here, talk about Travis Kelce and she's a nice gal. We've become friends on Twitter. She's actually getting some hate mail because she's talking about astrology on a sports show. Wow, right? Because a lot of times people don't understand that people that are into sports are also very religious. So now that they've got witchcraft and sorcery coming into their sports talk, oh, God forbid. Let's talk about Mars, and it's creeping, right? It's creeping up on that south node. I did a chart for October 4th, the day of the EBS, the Bridgette Broadcast System signal. I do not like that chart. I looked at that chart, and you're starting to see a bit of it here with all of these inconjuncts. They're even bigger. There are even more on October 4th. I didn't really buy into the September 23rd thing. I would definitely pay attention to October 4th. I'm going to get into more of that on the Sunday night show, right? But it brings up this aspect of Mars. And here we go. Venus and Mars are in this very tight sextile now. Venus has moved ahead a little bit, right? So Venus is taking the lead. And Venus takes the lead. And it's interesting too, because we have the sun in Libra, Venus ruled. So Venus will take the lead, both in terms of degree and by the position of the sun. So diplomacy first, and then, ass kicking fist second. No, it's not that bad. Diplomacy is good. Diplomacy is good, and finding ways to work with people and have reasonable partnerships, I think, are highlighted now, right? I mean, to me, Venus and Leo people, when you get into Venus and Leo, I love Venus and Leo. It's a really great placement for Venus. It's warm, it's effusive, it's affectionate, it can be really generous, right? Those are all great qualities of Venus and Leo. And Venus in general is all about contracts and agreements. So here we have the ease, especially with Venus moving in front of Mars. We have the ease of establishing hierarchies in relationship and partnerships. It's easy, right? It's kind of like, oh, okay, well, you're good at that. You do that. And then I'll take care of this. And then the other person could say, that's great. And when I'm done with that, you can do this because you're really good at. I mean, it's one of those aspects where equality is actually built into it. You don't have to root around and rummage around and try to come up with some synthetic model. And I really dig this Venus Juno conjunction. And it to me, it speaks to the birth of new partnerships, or new ways of looking at your existing partnerships. Now, that Venus is going to run into Black Moon Lilith, and we'll talk about it when it gets there. But we're still in that really nice sextile, that sexy sextile, and the trine with Chiron, which is, we talked about it yesterday, not really judgmental, like allowing people to just show up, right? You're okay. Just show up. You're okay. So there's that, and we like that. It's a very healing. Venus is playing a really, really interesting role right now. And again, the squares with Uranus and Jupiter are there to help you break out of patterns and to see a bigger picture. bigger picture with your agreements and your contracts, your relationship with the things that you love and are passionate about. So there's a lot of good today in the sky. And really, it's capped by the emergence of the Grand Trine, which we talked about last night or yesterday morning, my bad. Um, the Mars Pluto square becomes more problematic as we get closer to October 4th. October 4th, I believe it's the third, maybe the third or the second. I'd have to go back and check. We have the exact conjunction of Mars with the South Node. And on October 4th, Mars crosses that threshold. It crosses the threshold and it's on the other side of the South Node. And it gets closer to that square with Pluto. We'll talk more about that on Sunday night. All right, there you go. There's your astro weather for the day. Let's get into our star of the day. Today's star of the day is Bridgette Bardot. There was a time when Bridgette Bardot was considered to be the most beautiful woman in this world, right? She made her mark when Roger Vadim plucked her at a young age and did a movie called And God Created Woman, right? That says it all. And you could tell by her chart that in a lot of ways, that would be her path. She does not have an easy chart, though. Now, what's interesting about Bardot is not only was she young and beautiful, she's also rich. And she was rich before she became a movie star. She came from a wealthy family. She grew up in the south of France, right? So it wasn't like she necessarily needed to be a movie star, but she did. I mean, she's an archetype, and with Libra on the midheaven, that's Venus, right? Venus ruled, and then her sun, which is the highest planet in the chart, it's at apex, is also going to get noticed, right? And even in places outside of France. So she's going to be known for her beauty. And with Mercury Jupiter here, we'll get into Mercury Jupiter because she gets in trouble later on in life with her Mercury Jupiter, but not in a bad way, right? So she has Mercury and Jupiter in the 10th house. So Jupiter is going to bring more opportunities, right? More opportunities around what? Around her beauty, around being iconic. And Mercury clearly is going to result in things like motion pictures, talkies, and so she becomes, enormously successful, but not well liked. Not well liked. If you follow her career, women in France despised her, right? Absolutely despised her. The other thing, too, which is interesting about her chart is this Venus in Virgo and Neptune in Virgo. And I've gone through this before. Like there are women who are born under the sign of Virgo who are really stunningly beautiful, right? So, and Venus in Virgo has this kind of a purity attached to it. And eventually she would get there. Like, for instance, as she grew older, she did not have any like facial augmentation or any kind of procedures, right? She just grew old. So if you looked at later versions of Bridgette Bardot, you would be shocked because she got old, just like everybody gets old. And I think it really speaks to this Venus in Virgo in the 9th house. She's like, no, fuck it. I'm gonna have like a level of purity. I'm not gonna go down that path. And it really takes a lot of courage for somebody like her to do that, right? But women in France hated her. They would like spit on her picture, So here you get into these squares. She's got a hard chart. She's got that Sun Moon Trine, which again can evoke like the energy and the spirit of like the muse. Right? There's something kind of otherworldly with Sun Moon Trines. They can capture imagination, but because of where Chiron is placed, she's going to have a hard time with other women, and she was really judged around being a mother because she had one son and she left him. Right, she went off and married. She was married 4 times, so I think it might have been maybe her second marriage or third marriage. Um, and she was just raked over the coals for being a bad mom, right? Chiron Moon conjunction. And then it's all out there in the world to see. And we have all this judgment because Virgo is very judgmental in its own right, right? So that's part of her story as well. I also think that the Sun Moon Trine has a lot to do with her wealth. And she is a loaded eighth house, loaded eighth house. She's got Mars and Leo. She's got the South Node there. She's got Black Moon Lilith. There's a lot of hate from women with that Black Moon Lilith and the South Node in Leo. And it's, we know what she went through in her public life. What did she go through in her private life? Like what went through, what went on in her world internally? Probably not great, right? But to her credit, she eventually just says, fuck it, right? Like Leo is all about being the center of attention and being a star. And she's got the true node in Aquarius, which is she's supposed to take a different path. And even with Saturn, she grew up with wealth, but Saturn in the second house creates a sense of non-materiality in some ways. Like it's like, if you do have wealth, you want to do something with it, something constructive, right? Theoretically. And then she has this Saturn-Mars opposition. She had a very tempestuous relationship with men. Again, married 4 times. But, she does take the road less traveled. She retires pretty early from making movies, which is very true node in Aquarius. And she winds up becoming involved with animals, which is very Sagittarian in a lot of ways, right? Like when we think of Sag, we think of nature. Small animals are very 6th house, very, very 6th house. She has Chiron there, and she feels more at home with animals than she does with people. She's a big rescue person, and you can make a case that the animals are her children. She's become a pretty hardcore animal. She adopts a lot of stray dogs and she's like a crazy lady. But if there's any area that she's outspoken, it's in this area and one other area, which is, again, very interesting. And I think it has a lot to do with Sagittarius on her ascendant, Mercury conjunct Jupiter, right? Because you have to tell the truth. You have a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, you have to tell the truth. And she's been very outspoken against immigration in France. And in fact, she's been so outspoken about it, she's been fined, right? She has been fined because she basically said, no, we are a French country, and we don't need, the entire Muslim world living here and moving here. And she's gotten in trouble for that, right? So again, you see the outspoken nature around animals and around things like nationality, culture, and even up here with Venus and Neptune in the 9th house, I would say cultural purity in a lot of ways. Very interesting person. Like she had the world handed to her on an, like an oyster shell or an abalone shell, just like Venus, like Aphrodite. And even with all of those gifts, being born on third base, being beautiful, and she's smart, even with all of those things, her life was really difficult. And again, the public reception of her was not always met with open arms. She's a very interesting character. I was wondering if I should tell this story. It's one of those third person stories. And there was this guy, Michael Zagaris, who is a pretty well-known photographer in the Bay Area. And he would photograph the music scene and the sports scene. So he used to be on this radio show. And he would talk about stories around photography and people who would meet. Really interesting storyteller, too. And he was at a bar one time in Europe. I think it might have been Switzerland. And he's hanging out with this guy. And then there's this kind of beautiful woman that eventually kind of joins them at the bar, right? And he's looking, wow, it's really stunning. And, you know, they're going through, the guy's going through his wallet, and he sees a picture of Bridgette Bardot. And he goes, is that Bridgette Bardot? Is that a picture of her? He says, oh, yeah. Why do you have that picture of Bridgette Bardot? Goes, oh, she's my wife. And he's like, what? Yeah, she's my wife. And so I guess maybe the woman had gone to the powder room or whatever. And he's like, why are you hanging out with this woman while you're married to Bridgette Bardot? And the guy said, well, you know, if you have steak every night, every now and then you need a hamburger. It was the funniest fucking story, right? So even Bridgette Bardot, you know, who is this goddess of beauty, couldn't hold her I think it was her fourth husband. Couldn't hold him, right? Every now and then the guy had to have a burger. So there you go. There's a little bit of her life in a nutshell. Interesting person. God bless the beasts and the children. She eventually reconciled with her son. They eventually kissed and made up. You can even see like the wealth in her chart too, with that Pluto in the 8th house and the Venus sextile, right? But it didn't make her life any easier. In fact, it made her life harder, more difficult. There's your star of the day. Really heavily Venus ruled, the beautiful, beguiling, and controversial Bridgette Bardot. Okay, we are out of here for the day. Come catch me over on 15 Minutes of Flame side. We rebooted the website yesterday. It's all good. We're simulcasting on Rumble if you got used to that. And we're going to get into more of the aftermath of the shopping spree, the late night shopping spree in Philadelphia. We're going to get into more of that and where this might be headed. We're also going to circle around and kind of look at this what's her name, Katie Hobbs, governor of Arizona. Very unusual, super unusual. And so we'll cover some of those topics and more. And lastly, join me back here tomorrow because I did an interview yesterday with Dr. Shiva. Fucking great interview. Like the guy is really fascinating, right? Like he's lived at least 20 lifetimes in one. And he's only 3 years younger than me. So it's an hour-long interview. I think you'll enjoy it. We get into astrology just a little bit at the beginning because we covered sort of the Vedic version of it, right? Because when you're a kid in India, you take your son or your daughter off to the Vedic astrologer and you have your chart and, you know, they're going to mark your destiny based on your chart. We didn't really talk about what that was for him. We talked about that process a little bit, which was really cool. So please join me over here tomorrow. I'll play that in the first hour and who knows what I'll do in the second hour. Maybe we'll open it up for calls or I'll just riff on something. All right. Thanks for being here. Don't forget if you want to. Oh, by the way, everybody that bought me a coffee yesterday, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And you could still do that today if you feel so inclined. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to accept what's possible. Have a blessed day. I'm Robert Phoenix. You are you, and don't you ever forget it. Bye for now.